The first time I saw the fence, it was in the wrong light. Not the sunlight, the kind of light. The kind that makes your gut tighten before your brain catches up. The kind that makes your coffee taste like rust and your heartbeat skip in ways you can't explain. It was 6:14 a.m. I remember because my watch buzzed just as I rounded the bend past Lot 23. That was supposed to be my lot now. The little slice of earth I'd finally bought after 3 years of walking these streets in the same USPS uniform. My prize wasn't the grass or the rusted shed or the single maple tree that leaned toward the lake like it was tired. No, my prize was the gate. A simple, weathered iron gate that opened to a narrow gravel path leading to the water. The path most people in Lakewood didn't even know was still legal to use. Except now it was gone. In its place stood 6 feet of steel, silver in the morning haze, anchored in thick concrete pads like it had always been there. No chain link gaps, no roost, no door, just a wall, deliberate, smug in its permanence. And standing 10 feet away, as if she'd been waiting for me, was Christine Collins. She was dressed like she was stepping into a courtroom. Cream blazer, dark slacks, heels that didn't belong on gravel. Her white SUV idle behind her, spotless as ever. She didn't wave, didn't smile. She just looked at me, tilting her head in that way people do when they've already decided they're smarter than you. I wouldn't step closer, she said. No good morning, no explanation, just a warning, as if the land I'd paid for belonged to her voice now. I stopped where I was, more out of curiosity than obedience. Why's that? Because the police are on their way, and when they arrive, I'd like them to see exactly where you're standing. She smiled then, small, satisfied, like she'd already rehearsed this scene a dozen times in her head. The wind off the lake caught her hair just right, and she looked like the kind of person who believed the world was supposed to frame her. I wanted to ask her 100 questions at once, about the fence, about who gave her the right, but all that came out was, "You're joking." Her smile didn't move. No, somewhere behind us, a dog barked. Curtains shifted in the houses up the street. This neighborhood had the reflexes of small-town stage play. One actor raises their voice, and everyone else peeks through the wings. I thought about the key in my pocket. Heavy, old brass. Mr. Harrison's key. The one he placed in my palm 3 weeks earlier when the ink on the deed dried. "This belongs to you now," he'd said, his fingers closing mine around it like he was passing me something far older than paperwork. And yet, here I was, locked out of my own land. People think delivering mail is about envelopes and boxes. It's not. It's about routes. You walk the same roads long enough, you learn more about people than they learn about themselves. You know whose roses bloom first, whose trash bins always go out late, whose marriage is cracking because the bills stopped being shared. I knew Lakewood, and Lakewood knew me, which is why it felt surreal to stand here like an intruder while Christine, a woman who'd lived here maybe 6 months, acted like she was sheriff of the shoreline. She'd moved in like a storm front, unannounced, undeniable. Within 2 months, she'd gone from the polite new neighbor to the fresh face on the HOA board. A month after that, she was the board's mouthpiece, the one sending out bulletins about standards and visual consistency, like she was auditioning for a TV drama about suburban tyranny. I'd seen her walking with that leather-bound notebook, jotting down compliance issues like she was documenting wildlife. I'd also heard the way she talked to other residents when she thought I was just a male guy, sharp comments hidden inside polite phrasing, the way people who like control sharpen their teeth without showing them. But this was a new level. The distant whine of sirens cut through the morning stillness. Christine's eyes flicked toward the sound, then back to me. "You might want to think about how you explain this," she said, voice calm, but pulsing with the thrill of someone who thought they'd already won. After all, appearances matter. I didn't answer. I just reached into my jacket and wrapped my hand around the brass key. It was warm from my body heat, solid in a way the fence wasn't. The fence was new money. The key was history. And history, I was starting to realize, had teeth. By the time the patrol car rolled into view, half the street was watching. Christine straightened her blazer like she was about to accept an award. I stepped back from the fence, letting the steel and concrete fill the space between us. The officers knew me. Lakewood wasn't big enough for them not to. They'd gotten their share of holiday cards from Malcolm the mailman. and I'd handed them more packages than I could count, which meant they also knew this scene didn't fit. "Morning, Malcolm," one of them said as he stepped out. His eyes shifted to Christine. "Everything okay here?" Christine stepped forward like she was delivering closing arguments. "This man is trespassing on community property. He's been asked to leave and is refusing. I'm concerned for the safety of our residents." Her voice was sweetened for the audience, but the words were designed to stick like burrs. I didn't look at her. Instead, I pulled the folded deed from my jacket, unfolded it slowly, and held it out to the nearest officer. "This isn't community property," I said. "It's mine. And the path that fence is blocking, that's in the sale too." The officer's eyebrows lifted as he scanned the papers. The second one leaned in. Christine's stance wavered, just slightly, like she wasn't expecting to see actual proof in my hands. That's when I felt it. Not victory, not even relief. Just the first pull of a thread I hadn't known was there. Because if she'd gone this far, steel, concrete, cops, then there had to be more. And if I kept pulling, I had no idea what would come loose. The cops didn't arrest me. They didn't even tell me to step back. One of them, Officer Ray, folded my deed neatly and handed it back, his face giving away nothing but a faint flicker of recognition. "Malcolm, far as I can tell, you're standing on your own property. Fence or not." Christine's mouth tightened just enough to betray the crack in her confidence. "Then perhaps," she said, looking at the officers, "you should inform him about HOA compliance. This community has rules." The other cop glanced at her, then at me. "Ma'am, that's not something we enforce. If you've got an association dispute, that's a civil matter." The phrase civil matter landed between us like a dropped gavel. Christine's jaw worked once before she smoothed her face into something neutral. "I see." She turned to leave, heels clicking against the gravel, but paused halfway to her car. Her eyes met mine. There was no anger in them, no heat, just calculation. "You don't belong here, Malcolm," she said quietly enough that only I could hear. Then she got in her SUV and drove away without looking back. The thing about delivering mail is that you learn the art of ignoring things. Dogs barking, teenagers blasting music, people arguing on their porch. You keep moving because stopping means getting tangled in someone else's business. But Christine wasn't background noise. She was a signal, and that signal was now pointed squarely at me. By the next morning, I understood just how far she was willing to carry this. My supervisor called me into his office before I even started my route. The blinds were drawn, which was never a good sign. He slid a printed email across the desk. Subject: formal complaint regarding postal employee conduct. The sender was Christine Collins. I read the first line and felt my stomach tighten. She'd accused me of intimidating residents and misusing my role as a federal employee to pressure community members. She'd written it like a police report, cold, exact, every word a trap. "I know you, Malcolm," my supervisor said, leaning back. "This doesn't sound like you." But corporate gets touchy about this kind of language. I explained the situation, the deed, the fence, the cops, but even as I talked, I could see the worry in his eyes. It wasn't about believing me. It was about risk management. A single phrase in a letter like that could stick if enough people repeated it. "Keep your head down," he told me. "Don't give her an inch to work with." That night, the real blow landed. An email went out to the entire Lakewood HOA mailing list. Every homeowner, every address. The subject line, Community Safety Alert. It didn't name me, but it didn't have to. A service worker has been observed engaging in concerning behavior near restricted areas. It read, "Residents should be vigilant and report any intimidation or boundary violations." She described the fence incident in just enough detail that everyone would connect the dots. And she wrapped it in the language of protecting the community, the perfect mask for a personal vendetta. The replies started within the hour. Some asked what she meant. Others, neighbors I'd delivered mail to in snowstorms, whose kids I'd handed back lost gloves, began pushing back. "Malcolm is one of the most reliable people in this neighborhood. He's helped me carry groceries when my ankle was broken. He shovels his route in the winter so we don't slip." By the next morning, the email thread had turned into a public defense on my behalf. It should have felt like a win. It didn't. Because now it wasn't just me she was coming for. It was anyone who didn't agree with her. 2 days later, I spotted her at the lake. Not walking, not jogging, inspecting. She wasn't alone. 2 men with clipboards followed her like shadows, stopping every few feet to jot something down. She kept pointing at the fence, the ground, the shoreline. When she saw me, she didn't wave or speak. She just fixed me with a look that said, "I'm still here." It reminded me of something my brother once told me about certain types of lawyers. The ones who'd rather exhaust you than beat you outright. They're not playing to win the case, he'd said. They're playing to make you give up. That night, an envelope arrived at my apartment. Thick paper, expensive letterhead, a law firm's name I didn't recognize. Inside was a letter full of words that sounded important: trespass, violation, compliance, damages. Words that cost money to fight, even when they're empty. I called Marcus. My brother's been practicing law in D.C. for 15 years, and his laugh on the other end was half amusement, half warning. "This isn't about the law," he said. "This is intimidation. 90% of these phrases don't apply to your situation, and the other 10 are so vague they'd never hold up. But she's hoping you don't know that." "Then why bother?" I asked. "Because if you believe you're losing, you start acting like it. And that's when she wins." For the first time since buying Lot 23, I wondered if I'd made a mistake. Not because of the fence or the money or the legal mess, but because this wasn't about land anymore. It was about control. And Christine had made it clear she was willing to burn through time, money, and reputation just to prove she could hold it. I didn't plan on getting help. Asking for it felt like admitting she'd cornered me. But that changed the day I ran into Eleanor Reeves. She's 90, if she's a day, the kind of neighbor who can tell you who lived in each house on the block before you were born. She waved me over as I passed her porch. "Malcolm," she said, "come in. We need to talk about Christine." Her living room was a time capsule, floral curtains, framed photographs yellowed at the edges. She poured tea without asking, then went to a filing cabinet against the wall. "My Harold helped design this neighborhood," she said, pulling out a dusty folder. "He always said, put it on paper or it disappears when you're gone." Inside were documents, surveys, contracts, maps, all older than me. And in one thick stack labeled 1991 Lake Conservation Agreement, I saw the words that made my chest go still: perpetual access rights. "Lot 23 isn't just property, Malcolm," Eleanor said. "It's the key, and whoever holds it has more power than Christine wants you to know." I didn't sleep much that night. I kept picturing that brass key, heavy in my palm. I thought it opened a gate. Now I wasn't so sure. The next morning, I called Eleanor's friend who reads zoning codes for fun, Lena Brooks. Sharp voice, sharper mind. She agreed to meet me downtown. We spent an hour over coffee with the documents spread across the table. She kept circling phrases, murmuring to herself. "Conservation easement," she said finally, leaning back. "That's why she's fighting so hard. You're not just allowed to use the lake. You're legally obligated to keep it open. That fence? Illegal. Federally illegal." I sat there, the noise of the cafe blurring into nothing. Christine hadn't just been bluffing. She'd been hiding. And if Lena was right, I wasn't the one who'd been trespassing. Christine was. The words federally illegal hung between us like a lit fuse. Lena didn't smile when she said them. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, her eyes locked on mine. "Malcolm, you're not just some guy with a deed. According to this," she tapped the thick stack of yellowed pages, "you are the legal custodian of the entire lakefront access. It's your job by law to keep it open. That fence isn't just wrong. It's a direct violation of a 30-year conservation easement." My first thought was, this has to be a mistake. My second was, Christine knows. I could see her in my mind, that calm, almost smug way she'd looked at me through the steel bars. She wasn't just trying to block me. She was trying to erase me before I realized what I had. Lena slid a photocopy toward me. The title read, Harrison Family Conservation Agreement, 1991. I recognized the name. Harrison was the man I'd bought the property from. The same man who'd pressed the key into my palm with that strange, almost ceremonial weight. Lot 23 was written into this agreement as the guardian lot, Lena explained. Whoever owns it must protect the lake's public access forever. No HOA, no county board, no private citizen can overrule it. I stared at the faded signature at the bottom. Harold Harrison. Christine's last name was Collins, but she'd mentioned once in passing that she grew up near the water. Now it was clicking. She hadn't just stumbled into this fight. She'd been born into it. That night, I didn't eat. I didn't turn on the TV. I sat at my kitchen table with the documents spread out like a crime scene, tracing every line, every clause, every map. The more I read, the more I saw the trap she'd been setting. If she could get me out, force me to sell or surrender access, she could control the lake outright. No gate key, no guardian. Just her. The phone buzzed at 11:47 p.m. A number I didn't know. You think you've won something? You haven't. This is bigger than you. No name. No signature. Just that. I stared at it for a long time before saving the screenshot. My hand didn't shake. I was past that now. The next morning, the air felt different. Crisp. Clean. But my gut told me it was the calm before something. I decided if she was building a case in the shadows, I'd drag it into the light. Eleanor was on board before I'd finished explaining. Lena's eyes lit up with the kind of focus only people who like complicated fights get. Even Marcus, my brother who avoided family drama like the plague, said, "If you want them to listen, we do this in public. No surprises for us, only for her." We set the date for Saturday. No threats, no questions. Just an open invitation to learn the history of Lakewood's lakefront, complete with copies of the conservation agreement for anyone who wanted to read it. The days leading up to it were a strange mix of normal and electric. I still ran my route, still waved to kids at bus stops, still slid letters into mailboxes. But in the back of my mind, every step felt like a countdown. Christine didn't show herself much that week. No SUV by the fence. No inspection walks. But I could feel her moving pieces somewhere, the quiet kind of movement that doesn't show until it's too late. On Friday evening, as I was locking up at the post office, Officer Ray stepped in. "You hear about the HOA meeting last night?" "No," I said. He smirked. "Word is, Christine told the board she's got new evidence against you. Something about misuse of property rights." He shrugged. "Could be nothing. Could be she's trying to get ahead of whatever you've got planned." That night, I barely slept. Every possible outcome looped through my head. Maybe she'd turn the crowd against me. Maybe she'd show up with her own set of documents, real or fake. Maybe she'd just laugh in my face. By sunrise, I decided it didn't matter. The truth was the truth, and the truth had teeth sharper than hers. Saturday came bright and deceptively peaceful. We set up by the lake, folding tables, stacks of documents, a simple banner Eleanor had painted, Lakewood's legacy, then and now. Neighbors drifted in slowly at first. Retirees in sun hats, parents pushing strollers, teenagers pretending not to care. And then, right on cue, the white SUV rolled up. Christine stepped out like she was walking into a photo shoot. White power suit, sunglasses, every hair in place. She didn't glance at the documents on the table. She looked at me. Only me. "Hosting events on property you're about to lose access to," she said just loud enough for those nearby to hear. I smiled. Funny. I was about to say the same to you. Her jaw tightened, but she kept her smile as she moved through the crowd. Greeting a few neighbors like this was her campaign rally. Marcus arrived, briefcase in hand, Lena beside him. The county environmental rep stood quietly near the back. I caught Christine clocking them, her eyes narrowing. When it was time, I didn't start with the fence or the fight. I started with a story. 30 years ago, I said, loud enough for the circle of neighbors to hear, a man named Harold Harrison signed an agreement to protect this lake, not for himself, but for everyone who lives here. That agreement gave one property the legal duty to keep the lakefront open forever. That property is Lot 23. I held up the old key. Brass. Worn. Familiar. And right now, that property belongs to me. The murmur through the crowd was low, curious. Christine's smile had frozen, her sunglasses hiding her eyes, but not the stiffness in her posture. Marcus stepped forward, voice steady, professional. "I've reviewed the original conservation easement. Under federal and county law, no homeowners association, no individual resident has the authority to restrict this access. In fact, the recent construction of a fence here is a violation punishable by fines. The county rep spoke next, his words blunt. This fence will be removed, and penalties will be issued to those responsible. Christine laughed. Just once. That's absurd. I've never received any such. Lena cut her off, holding up a folder. You've received annual notifications of these requirements for 20 years. Christine Harrison Collins. The name hit like a dropped stone. People turned. Someone whispered, "She's Harrison's granddaughter?" Christine's face went pale. Lena went on, calm and precise. You knew exactly what this agreement required. You knew Lot 23's owner was the legal guardian of a lake. And you knew building that fence was a direct violation. The crowd was silent now, the kind of silence that isn't absence of sound, it's the absence of forgiveness. For weeks, Christine had tried to make me the trespasser, the outsider, the problem. But now, under the weight of old paper and older truth, it was her standing on the wrong side of the gate. And for the first time since this started, I realized this fight wasn't about whether I belonged here. It was about whether she ever did. Christine didn't move. For a moment, the whole world seemed balanced on her silence. Sunlight flashed off the lake, blinding at the edges, and the crowd stayed frozen. A half circle of crossed arms, furrowed brows, and the occasional sideways glance. You could almost hear the ripple of shifting loyalties. The first voice came from Mrs. Wilson, the same neighbor who once passed me lemonade on summer routes. "Christine," she said, her voice cutting through the quiet, "is it true? Did your grandfather protect this land for the neighborhood?" Christine's lips parted, but nothing came out. She adjusted her sunglasses, buying herself a few seconds that everyone could see. "My grandfather built this community," she said finally, her tone soft but sharp at the edges. "And he wanted it safe. That's what I've been doing. Safe." The word floated there, brittle. Marcus stepped in before she could spin it further. Safe doesn't mean blocked. This agreement exists so no one, not even family, can hoard the shoreline. The law's not vague about it. The county rep nodded once. "We'll be issuing violation notices within the week. Personal and organizational." The reaction hit in waves. Someone in the back muttered, "That's a hell of a fine." Another, Mr. Chun, shook his head and said, "All this for a fence." Christine straightened. "You think you know the whole story, but you don't. You think a stack of paper makes you the hero." She turned toward me, her sunglasses hiding her eyes, but I could feel them burning. "You're nothing but the mailman who got lucky." A couple of people shifted uncomfortably, but no one rushed to defend her. "Not now." "You're right," I said, keeping my voice even. "I am a mailman, and I'm the one who shows up every day. Rain, snow, whatever. I'm the one who's watched this lake in every season for 3 years. And I'll keep showing up because that's what the job is. This," I held up the brass key, "is just another delivery. Except this time, it's to all of you." I set the key on the table beside the old documents, the metal catching the sun like a flare. The point wasn't subtle. This didn't belong in my pocket. It belonged to the promise Harrison had made. Christine's composure began to crack, almost imperceptibly at first. A small swallow, a tightness in her jaw. She turned toward the HOA board members, who suddenly seemed fascinated with the ground. "You're not going to let this stand," she said to them, her voice dropping. "We can fight this." The HOA president, a soft-spoken man named Briggs, cleared his throat. "We acted on your assurance that the HOA had authority here. If we'd known about the conservation agreement, you did know," she snapped. "I told you." She stopped herself too late. The slip was out there now, hanging in the air. Briggs' expression shifted. So did the boards. That's when I knew. She wasn't just losing the crowd. She was losing her allies. Eleanor stepped forward then, cane tapping against the dirt. "Christine Harrison Collins," she said, her voice a mix of steel and sorrow. "Your grandfather sat in my kitchen when he signed that agreement. He cried because he'd seen too many places lose their soul to greed. I don't know what happened to you, but I know what happened here, and we're not going to let you undo it." The weight of her words settled over everyone. Christine flinched, Not at my documents, not at the legal threat, but at Eleanor. I wish I could say I felt triumphant in that moment. I didn't. I felt hollow, because under all her games and condescension, I could see something else in her expression now: desperation. And desperation has a way of making people dangerous. The county rep began outlining the process for removing the fence, and I let his voice fade into the background. My eyes stayed on Christine. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was looking past me, scanning faces, calculating exits. She wasn't done. After the crowd thinned, Marcus clapped me on the shoulder. "You've got her cornered." "Yeah," I said, "but corners have edges, and edges cut both ways." By late afternoon, the lakefront was empty again. The tables were packed up, the key back in my pocket. I lingered, watching the light bend across the water. It should have felt like a win. Instead, it felt like the moment before an argument you know isn't finished. That's when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Enjoy your little victory. See what happens next." No signature. No need for one. That night, sleep was impossible. Every sound outside my apartment put me on edge. A car door, footsteps, the hum of the streetlight. I caught myself rehearsing what I'd do if she escalated beyond words and paper. By dawn, I decided to be ready for anything. 3 days later, the first fine notices were posted. One on the HOA's bulletin board, another on Christine's front door. $12,000 for the association. $21,000 for her personally. Lakewood went quiet. Neighbors still chatted, still waved, but the conversations behind closed doors shifted. People want to know what Christine would do next. Whether the HOA would crumble. Whether I'd actually hold the key without challenge. That's when Briggs showed up at my route stop. He was out of breath, like he'd walked faster than usual to catch me. "She's calling an emergency meeting," he said. "No agenda, no minutes. Just says it's about corrective action." Thought you should know. Corrective action. The phrase lodged in my head like a splinter. By the time Saturday rolled around, I'd heard half a dozen rumors. That she'd found a loophole. That she was suing the county. That she'd convinced a few residents I was planning to charge for lake access. It was all smoke. But smoke means fire somewhere. The meeting wasn't public, but I didn't need to be inside to feel the heat. I stood outside the community hall, listening to the muffled voices rise and fall. Once, sharply, I heard my name. When the door opened, people came out in ones and twos, their expressions a mix of relief and discomfort. No one met my eyes. Finally, Briggs emerged, face pale. "She's threatening to take it federal. Claims she has backing." Backing from who? He hesitated. "Family." That's when it hit me, the piece I hadn't been seeing. She wasn't fighting for the HOA's sake, or even for her own pride. She was fighting for some promise she thought had been made to her before Harrison ever sold me the lot. And that meant she'd burn everything. Herself, the HOA, maybe even me, to prove it. The fence was just the start. That night, as I locked my apartment door, I made a decision that turned the whole fight on its head. I wouldn't just wait for her next move. I'd make it. The morning of my move came in sharp, thin frost on mailboxes, a wind that carried the smell of the lake even from blocks away. I wasn't moving homes. I was moving to fight. For weeks, Christine had kept the game in whispers, boardrooms, and selective emails. If she wanted a shadow war, I'd drag it under the floodlights. At 8 a.m., I unlocked the gate to Lot 23. Not just for me, for everyone. Word had gone out the night before. Lakefront opened today. No permission needed. By 9, the gravel path was alive with footsteps. Kids chasing each other toward the water. Couples carrying folding chairs. Old-timers with fishing rods. Every time the gate creaked open, it was like an old heartbeat starting again. And Christine? She'd see it from her window. She arrived just after 10, white SUV, nosing into the dead end like it owned the road. The moment she stepped out, the conversations quieted. She wasn't dressed for confrontation this time. Dark jeans, navy coat, hairpin back. But her face was set like stone. "Everyone out," she said, loud enough to carry over the wind. "This is private property under HOA jurisdiction. You are trespassing." Briggs, the HOA president, shuffled beside her, looking more like a hostage than an ally. "Christine," She raised a hand. Not now. I was already walking toward her, the keys swinging from my finger. You want to explain to the county rep why you're issuing eviction orders on federally protected land? He's over there by the dock. Her eyes flicked past me to where the rep stood, clipboard in hand, watching. She didn't flinch. You think one piece of paper erases decades of mismanagement? My grandfather, your grandfather wrote the paper. I cut in, and he signed it, and he gave this place away to all of us. You're the only one who doesn't seem to know that. Her voice dropped low just for me. He promised me it would be mine, every inch of it. Said I'd keep it safe from people who don't belong here. There it was, the truth. Not about law or safety, about ownership, about entitlement dressed up as guardianship. And here I am, I said, the mailman, the one who belongs here enough to walk every street in every season. Her jaw trembled once, and I saw it. The smallest fracture in all that steel. But fractures can cut. She turned suddenly toward the crowd. You think he's opening this for you? He'll ruin it. He'll let strangers in. He'll sell it the second he gets bored. And you'll have nothing left but beer cans on the shore. Gasps, murmurs. Some heads turned toward me. That was the play. Poison the water before I could hand them the cup. So I reached into my jacket and pulled out the folder Lena had given me. The one with every clause, every signature, every recorded notice Christine had ignored. I laid it on the picnic table where everyone could see. You want to know the difference between me and Christine? I said, I'm showing you everything. I'm not hiding behind gates, or meetings without minutes, or letters meant to scare you into silence. I stepped back, letting the papers flap in the wind. Neighbors leaned in to read, their hands tracing the same signatures I'd stared at for nights. Christine moved fast then, too fast, reaching for the folder. But Briggs caught her wrist before she could snatch it. Enough, he said, voice shaking. We're done here, Christine. She froze. The crowd watched. Briggs released her hand slowly, like he was setting down something fragile that could still explode. The county rep stepped forward. The fence comes down this week. Fines are due in 30 days. If the HOA fails to comply, enforcement will escalate. Her face was unreadable now, wiped clean. Only her hands betrayed her, clenched fists, white-knuckled. And then she laughed. Not the brittle laugh from before, but something darker. You think this is over because you've got the mob on your side? You don't know what I can do. I met her eyes. I know exactly what you can do, and I know exactly what you can't. It was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that makes you hear your own breath. Then she turned, walked to her SUV, and drove away without looking back. The crowd stayed, but the air had shifted. Some talked about fishing trips. Others offered to help clear the overgrown edges of the path. Briggs asked if I'd be willing to coordinate an open day each month. I said yes, not because I wanted the responsibility, but because it was never about what I wanted. It was about making sure no one could lock this place away again. That afternoon, I walked the path alone. The lake was glass, sky reflected in perfect detail. At the dock, I dropped the key into my palm and turned it over in the light. For weeks, it had felt like a weight. Now it felt like a compass. I thought about Harrison, about Christine's words. He promised me it would be mine. Maybe he had. Maybe promises change when you see what they cost. I slipped the key back into my pocket and headed home. She was waiting for me. Christine stood beside my apartment door, hands in her coat pockets, no SUV in sight. The hall light flickered, painting her face in split-second shadows. This isn't over, she said quietly. Then you should have stayed, I told her. Because the rest of us? We're done. She studied me for a long beat, her eyes searching for something I didn't intend to give her. Then she stepped back, walked down the hall, and disappeared into the stairwell without a sound. The next morning, the fence was gone. The posts had been cut at the base, the metal hauled away, leaving only raw earth and a view of the water. I unlocked the gate one last time, not for ceremony, but because it was what the key was made for. The hinges groaned, the path opened, and the lake lay there, unguarded and infinite. I didn't know if Christine would try again. I didn't care, because whatever she thought she owned, the truth was mine now. And the truth didn't come with locks. The days after the fence came down felt almost unnatural in their calm. I'd gotten so used to checking over my shoulder, to reading every email twice for hidden barbs, to scanning the street for Christine's SUV, that the stillness was disorienting. No more shadow meetings. No more letters slipped under my door. Just the lake, the wind, and the occasional hum of a fishing reel being cast into the water. Neighbors came by in ones and twos to say something. Some offered thanks, others just gave a nod. It wasn't about taking sides anymore. It was about knowing that something here was safe again. Even the HOA board, stripped of Christine's grip, seemed lighter. Briggs stopped me one afternoon on my route, holding a cup of coffee like he didn't know what to do with his hands. "You've changed the way we look at things," he said. "For the better, I think." I didn't tell him I hadn't set out to change anything. All I'd wanted was to sit by the water before my shift. All I'd done was refuse to be erased. Christine didn't vanish. I saw her twice in the weeks that followed. Once at the grocery store, once driving through Lakewood with her windows up. No words exchanged, just a moment of eye contact that said more than a dozen arguments ever could. She'd lost her board position quietly, without a vote, without an announcement. People just stopped returning her calls. But there was no satisfaction in her absence. Victory, I learned, isn't a fireworks show. It's the slow settling of the dust after the last shot's been fired, when you can finally see what's been left standing. The county had the new conservation sign carved from cedar, Harrison Conservation Area, protected by legacy. I was there the morning they set it in the ground, watching the workers level it just right. The brass key hung in my pocket, heavier than usual. Eleanor stood beside me, her hand resting on her cane. "You know," she said, "Harold would have liked you. You've got that stubborn streak. The good kind." I smiled. I don't know if Christine would agree. She gave me a long look. It's not about agreement. It's about what's right. People like her mistake ownership for guardianship. But guardianship is about leaving something better than you found it. On a Tuesday afternoon, weeks after the fight had ended, I took the key and walked the path alone. The leaves had started to turn, reds and golds drifting across the water like slow-moving embers. The air was cool enough to bite, but the light was soft, the kind of light that makes you forget winter's coming. I sat on the dock, shoes hanging just over the water, and thought about everything that had happened. The fence was gone. The lies had unraveled. The lake was open. But the thing that stuck with me wasn't Christine's downfall. It was the people, the ones who'd stepped up without being asked, the ones who'd spoken out when it mattered, the ones who'd shown me, in 100 small ways, that the fight had never been mine alone. I took the key out, feeling the grooves worn by decades of use. Verás, guarder familiar. When Harrison had handed it to me, I'd thought it was permission. Now I knew it was responsibility. And responsibility doesn't end when the argument does. I stood, looked out across the still water, and slid the key into the padlock. The gate opened with that same groan, but this time it didn't sound tired. It sounded alive. Maybe Christine would try again. Maybe someone else would, years from now. That's the thing about gates. There's always someone who thinks they're entitled to close them. But as long as I'm here, I'll have the key. And the key isn't just metal. It's proof that sometimes the person they try hardest to push out is the one meant to hold the door open. I locked the gate behind me, slipped the key back into my pocket, and started up the path. The lake was behind me, the street ahead, and the wind carried the faintest sound of laughter from somewhere down the shore. Maybe it was just the water. Or maybe it was Harrison, wherever he was, reminding me what he'd said without words. Protect what matters. Because someday, someone will try to take it, and they'll do it with a smile. And when they do, I'll be here, with the key.